sunlight is a drug, and it's
Yeah.
just like any drug. It should be used accordingly and with caution and with care. Blue light is basically warning the brain and the whole system that ultraviolet is coming soon. Mold grows in dark, dingy, damp places, not in sunlight. More natural bright light during the day and less artificial light at night, or just more darkness at night. That's how you strengthen each phase of the circadian rhythm. The kids don't have that protection, so that shorter wavelength light is actually coming through in much higher doses and causing more damage actually to their retina and the macula. To save energy, they said, let's cut out all that wasted electricity, because there's light bulbs everywhere in halogen and incandescent bulbs, and use this compact fluorescent technology. Just by standing in a forest or around green plants, living chlorophyll, you're actually having a light spectrum which is optimal for human health and for our cells. Getting up and getting morning sunlight 10 to 15 minutes every day. We'll put these on either at sunset, from sunset to sleep, or 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. And so the brain starts to release more melatonin.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Gut Check podcast. Today I have a wonderful guest, Matt Maruca, the founder and CEO of Raw Optics. He joins us to share his research and his learnings around what he calls the light diet, as well as how he's really building the future of lighting with what's called hormone-neutral lighting. Fascinating conversation about how our hormones, melatonin, dopamine, serotonin, all of these things are impacted by light every single day. So let us know what you think about this episode, and we can't wait to see you next time. Matt Maruca from Raw Optics is here with us. He is the founder of this amazing company. Matt, thank you for joining us for this conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Joining all the way from Germany.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, let's just dive in here. So for those that don't know you or your company, why don't we just dive in with a little bit of background on Raw Optics and how you got going with this amazing company?
So when I was a young kid, I experienced a variety of health issues that were, let's say, bringing me down. So I was experiencing, since a young age, gut issues like gas, bloating, gut pain, and, as young as I can remember, like 5, 6 years old. And then as I got a bit older, I started to have seasonal allergies, really severe pollen allergies, itchy eyes, itchy throat, itchy everything, especially in the springtime. That was very unpleasant. And of course, I didn't know then that the two were most probably linked. Then, a couple of years later, going into middle school, high school, I started to have really bad headaches as well in class. And so by the time I was actually entering high school, turned 13 years old, these symptoms were quite uncomfortable, I would say. And, just depending on maybe what I ate that day, and I didn't really know what exactly affected it all. But it was definitely something that was a real and challenging part of my experience. And now, in retrospect, I look at it like it was a blessing, because but at the time it was a great challenge. So I began researching and reading everything I could. I had already, throughout those previous years of youth, elementary school, middle school, I had seen different doctors. I joke truthfully that I went to Western medicine, and the pediatrician told me to take Advil for my headaches. The gastroenterologist told me to take Tums for my gut issues, and the allergist told me to take Advil, Claritin, I should say, Zyrtec, and other prescription antihistamines for my allergies. Literally, that was the prescription. There was never really an inquiry into what the root cause was. And so I began my own research as I was a curious 13-year-old going into high school, and read everything I could. And I came across the idea of nutrition and how it could affect our gut health in particular. That was a really big sort of initial sticking point for me. How the gut plays such an important and crucial role in our health. Leaky gut can, be a problem and whatnot. And I became convinced that food was the main cause of my issues at that time. This is what I believed. And so as a result of believing this, I became obsessed with the perfect diet, because the kind of implication of this was that the way to solve the gut issues was with your diet. And I spent the next 2 or 3 years, through high school, just obsessively dieting, but to a point where it became very unhealthy, like orthorexic,
Mhm.
Essentially just being so obsessed about my food, really terrified that I would eat the wrong thing and it would hurt me,
Mm.
limiting myself. I went from like a paleo diet to an autoimmune paleo diet
Mm.
to like a keto autoimmune paleo diet to a GAPS diet. And I was like 15, 16. This is more than 10 years ago now. And the thing was, because I felt so restricted, some part of me just felt like this was not right, or just
Yeah.
was so not happy, honestly, with it, especially the strictness. I would then would go and eat tubs of ice cream, like just because
Yeah.
I was so fed up with the whole thing. But then I'd feel terrible. And then I'd think I was actually out to basically ruin myself, and it just
Yeah.
became this challenging cycle. So uh, I actually went abroad for a year in high school, partially because I just didn't really love where I was, and
Yeah.
probably had more to do with my personal state. It was kind of an escape, but the escape
Mhm.
actually ended up being freeing. I ended up studying in Eastern Europe, in a country called
Mm.
Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is formerly Yugoslavia. Fell
Mhm.
apart, and it was a very, very obscure, less well-known place in Europe, but one of the most beautiful countries. Still, I've been all over the world. One of the most beautiful countries and beautiful people, and war torn, but great. Anyway, and just before I left, in the months leading up to that, so I was then 15. I was a sophomore in high school. I was uh, my dieting stuff had kind of evolved. So I came across some bloggers in the health sphere talking about the role that light plays in health, but it didn't just
Mm.
go straight into light. It was kind of like mitochondria and ice baths, and
Yeah.
the benefit, there's grounding and the risks of electromagnetic radiation. There was one particular neurosurgeon, doctor, who I gladly give credit to. His name's Dr. Jack Kruse, kind
Mm.
of a mega genius in that space, who really brought attention to these topics well before anybody else. And a lot of the big names in health and wellness today, the Hubermans and
Yep.
Aspreys and whatnot, really learned a lot about those topics from this guy who had the confidence to kind of bring it out, because everybody attacks people often, or many people attack
Right.
people who they don't understand, or who bring out new ideas. So anyway, came
Yeah.
across this neurosurgeon's blog and work, and then plenty of other people talking about these subjects as they were growing in interest. Um, there were all sorts of books that were recommended. There were these Facebook groups and communities. So I started reading all these books, and I became obsessed. So I was thinking, if this stuff's true, I want to go and learn from the experts themselves, and read their work. All these years later, one of the experts, I'm actually at his house. I mentioned he's now my scientific
So
advisor for
good.
my company. This is over 10 years
Yeah.
later, but I was reading his work, watching his videos years and years ago, to see, is
Yeah.
this stuff really legit? And I became convinced, based on everything I was learning, that although diet does play a very important role in health and well-being, it is only one piece of a much, much, much larger puzzle. And the analogy that really kind of made things click for me, that connected the dots, was this idea that our body is kind of like a car, in the sense that we consume fuel,
Mhm.
hydrogen-based fuel, which gasoline's also hydrogen-based fuel from
Mhm.
ancient fossils, or ancient organic matter from a long time ago, buried in the ground, oil that's then refined. But it's hydrogen-based fuel, just like a banana or any food we eat is hydrogen-based fuel. And we take it in to the engine, and we mix it with oxygen, which we breathe, and a car engine inhales. It needs oxygen to make fire, and then in the process of burning that fuel, we release energy, and we make water. That's what comes out of the back of a car. The exhaust is to let the steam out, and same with any factory, the steam needs to go out. So um, anyway, if so let's just say the car has a problem, like it's driving down the road one day. You're driving your car, and it's blowing black smoke, it's not accelerating, it's having some kind of issue. That was my experience with my health, let's say. And so I came across, so let's say you ask somebody for advice. They say, okay, well, what you should do is you should improve the gasoline. So you go from your regular gas to your premium gas, and maybe even throw in some fuel additives. And so, to the diet analogy, or the health analogy, that would be like, okay, something's wrong with me. Let me improve my diet, like improving the gasoline in the car. And fuel additives, let's say, would be something like your vitamins and your supplements. I was taking
Mhm.
tons of different vitamins and supplements. And then you do all that, and then you're driving and the car is still having the same problems. It's still
Mhm.
blowing smoke and, not accelerating, misfiring and everything. And then you take it to a mechanic, not just some person who thinks they knew the solution. And the mechanic says, well, yeah, they open the engine and they say, oh, your spark plugs are messed up. Something's wrong in the ignition system of the car. We need to replace the spark plugs. They're worn out or whatever. They fix that. And then all of a sudden the car works fine, whether you're using regular or premium, gas, for example. So that doesn't mean you shouldn't use premium gas to preserve the function of the engine, but there's just other factors that are at play besides the fuel that's going in. Something else can be wrong in the engine. And this applies to us in the sense that our cells have these engines called mitochondria. And the mitochondria, as I mentioned, they literally take in fuel, hydrogen-based fuel. We breathe oxygen and we burn the two. We actually react them together. They make water, and that releases a lot of energy. Our cells make water. We make like 1 to 2 liters of water per day, which is like half a gallon. It's a lot. So in our mitochondria, and that's how we make energy in our cells. So if something's wrong in the mitochondria, in the cellular engines, then you could do everything from a diet perspective, but it's not necessarily going to fix the mitochondria. And this is the concept that I learned that just blew my mind. And some of the factors that influence our mitochondria are light. Light's one of the biggest because it controls our circadian rhythm, our body clock, which regulates the release of key hormones, especially like melatonin, which is responsible for mitochondrial repair and cellular repair. Helping the mitochondria to wind down and then go into repair mode in the evening. And then, it's all the light and circadian rhythms regulate the increase of mitochondrial activity during the day when we wake up and they need to make more energy. There are other factors, of course, like electromagnetic fields, like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, the stuff we're exposed to all the time has unfortunately negative effects that have been shown on, cells and mitochondria. Of course, toxins and all the other stuff in the environment has negative effects. So there are many other factors. And the point was, and this hit me so hard because I had spent so many years obsessing about diet. And when you're that young, a year or two feels like lifetimes, so it felt like lifetimes I had been in this stuck. And I learned about a concept that could help me to be unstuck. And so I started focusing not just on my food diet, but on my light diet. And that's what I call, that's like my Instagram and kind of personal brand is the light diet, because it's about how do we change our light exposure and electromagnetic exposure in a way that's positive for us. So anyway, to kind of cut to the chase, I came back from the year while I was abroad and studying abroad in this foreign country. I saw everybody was outdoors more, walking around more, eating healthier food from the land, more organic and local. But really outside a lot. And it just all kind of clicked for me like this, and more natural lifestyle, even though it's still a Western country, developed people live in houses, like they have apartments, they're normal people, they drive cars, they go to school. Just the amount of time they spend outside, walking everywhere, sitting, having a coffee, eating healthy food, the people were just much healthier and more robust. And I just, in my head, with my biases from all this information I had learned, and I definitely was biased, and I wanted to believe this, but the people looked so much more vibrant and robust and healthy. And to an extent that I was just thinking, there's no way this could be attributed just to genetics. It has to be epigenetic. That was another concept I learned about, which is related to mitochondria. The healthier the mitochondria, the healthier the body, the higher quality of genes, basically, that the cells can express, and the higher quality of proteins that the body can produce, and therefore a greater state of health. And I'm just thinking, American people have great genetics. I mean, these are people with mixed genes from all over the world. If anything, very robust genes from all sorts of different peoples. The people who basically colonized this whole continent. I mean, this isn't like a weak gene pool in the United States. These people sailed the oceans, escaped foreign land and wars. Like, they're not weak people. Why is everybody sick and fat and obese? And all these people are slim and beautiful and healthy, like on a relative basis. And it must have been epigenetic. So that further confirmed my conviction. And then finally I came home and had my last year in high school. I was like, I learned all this information. There's no way I can go to college and have a professor who I think knows nothing tell me that they know everything. So I got to figure something out to prevent that. And so I was thinking about entrepreneurship, and through all these Facebook groups, I had met some really cool, inspiring people who gave me tips, books to read and things like this. And I thought about different businesses and different opportunities, coaching, health coaching, this and that, even light bulbs, which I'm now actually working on, fortunately. But one of the tools to help regulate our light diet and our body clock was these blue light blocking glasses, which are lenses, that basically filter the wavelengths of light that affect our body clock, our circadian rhythms, in order to kind of take back control from the disruptive effects of modern artificial lights. So that in the evening we're not having our melatonin disrupted. Anyway, we'll get into that in more detail, but I was using
Yeah.
these glasses as part of that regimen, and they were just kind of cheap safety goggles from Amazon that blocked the right spectrum of light. And the
Mm-hmm.
ones, like any blue light glasses that looked cool, they didn't block enough of the light or the right spectrum of the light. So because it was in high school and I wanted to, get girls and stuff, like I wasn't going to wear something that was super ugly all the time. And so I had to have something custom made,
Yeah.
which was very expensive. My dad paid for it for me because I don't really have any money. And then eventually, as I was finishing high school, I realized, there's an opportunity for this. I actually went to try to go on a podcast with this fashion stylist, health and wellness guru podcaster, and when I asked if I could go on his show to talk about all the stuff I was interested in, he asked where'd you get those cool glasses? Me and my buddy, who was also on the blue blocking glasses train with me. And so that's kind of how it was actually born. It was like all the years of personal experience. And then I didn't really
Cool.
think this would be my business, but it was like, in retrospect, when I look back at that moment, that night when I went up to this guy's event in New York City, I'm from Philly originally. So I drove
Yeah.
up because he was coming all the way from LA. He was going to be in New York. I was like, this is my chance because I like this guy. He seems like he'd be open to this information for his show. He had interviewed one of the people who I had learned so much information from, but it was clear that as that person was such a strong expert, this podcaster, I should say, and his audience probably weren't getting all the information because it was a little too complex.
Yeah.
So anyway, it just kind of clicked.
Yeah.
I was asking for the opportunity to spread this information, and him, I think the universe through him was asking, hey, people need the tools to make the information practical and useful. So can you supply that? And so then I had to figure that out. And that's been now the last 8 years of doing that. So that's how the company started.
So, as far as the timing of this, so this was about 10 years ago, when you started Raw Optics, I mean, this whole biohacking a movement, I think is the right way to say it. Was this biohacking movement active, or did you feel like you were really the only one? Because, I mean, notably, there's a few other companies, but notably Dave Asprey, right? Just because he had the right time in the right place, was the one wearing these glasses everywhere. I think within the biohacking community, most people are familiar with him.
Yeah.
Was this kind of during that time, before that time?
I would say that from my memory, biohacking definitely was a thing that had started in
Yeah.
2016, 2017. Like it was definitely a term that was
Yep.
being used even regularly. I mean, I remember I went to a conference, literally the biohacker conference in Toronto, organized by a group of Finnish guys in, I think it was either 2018 in the autumn or 2019, but I think it was 2018 in the fall. So it was definitely a thing, but it definitely wasn't as mainstream. Like for perspective, I have, my friends from high school. It is, honestly, it's funny when you ask this. Like it does make me feel like I've been grandfathered into this thing for so long in a
Yeah.
way. But I have friends from high school, or like my sister's friends, for example, who are like, oh my gosh, like I'm listening to Huberman tell me to take ice baths. They're like, you were taking ice baths in your backyard in like 2015. Like, how did you
Yeah.
know that stuff? So it definitely was really early. Like I remember when I learned about the paleo diet in 2013, and it was like, of course, the paleo bloggers and stuff, like they had, I mean, if you compare, like Instagram's evolved so much, they probably didn't even have, maybe tens of thousands of Instagram followers at the time, whereas some are hundreds of thousands or maybe millions. It was definitely younger. And like Whole Foods, like I remember nobody I talked to knew what the paleo diet was. That was
Yeah.
like my first thing. I was like a priest trying to not even a priest, but like trying to religiously proselytize this diet. I was so obsessed.
Yeah.
Nobody knew what it was. But now you go into Whole Foods and it's like paleo is like on the labels of things. So, or on so many packages. So yeah, it's definitely come a really long way. As far as companies around, that was the problem, was that, as I said, there was basically these safety goggles from Amazon that, they cost like 10, 15 bucks. So that was good in a way, but they also just were cheap plastic goggles, and, they weren't going to last very long. And they were definitely not something people were really going to wear confidently. They weren't really a fashion piece or a style piece at all.
Yeah.
And then the ones that were like more fashionable were just kind of the clear lenses, which are still sold more and more today, where they just have this flashy blue coating, and those don't meaningfully block a significant portion of blue light. So one company came around called Carbon Shade, which tried to make blue blocking glasses cool. And I remember literally when that came out on Kickstarter, I think I
Yeah.
even bought a pair right away. I remember thinking, God, thank God somebody's doing this, because I would never want to run a glasses company. Like, I really remember that thought going through my head, ironically, when I
Yeah.
was 16. And then they just weren't that high quality. They weren't that
Yeah.
great. Like, they didn't market it or, brand it very well. So I think they just disappeared. There was another company, Swannies, which is still around. Actually, a friend of mine bought them recently. So, good for them. But again,
Yeah.
like, from a quality perspective, I could talk about all the reasons why our
Yeah.
lenses and frames are far, far, far better. True Dark, Dave Asprey's deal. Again, I don't remember if they were around in 2017, but they definitely came around like 2018, 2019, and they're still around, of course. But they, in my view, they failed on fashion, unfortunately, for the longest time, and I don't know if they can recover from that. I think they're trying. I still
Yeah.
don't think they have. So anyway, yeah, there were other brands, but now it's like gangbusters. I mean, everybody's going after this now.
So you call sunlight a drug. When you first kind of feel that hit, like, heart pounding, mood flipping, energy flip, you start wearing these glasses, really, really, understanding and realizing the power that light has on your body. What was that like? And why do you refer to sunlight as a drug?
I'm not sure how often I refer to it as a drug, or at least it is. It really should be treated like a drug.
Yeah.
Um, when I
I
first learned,
like it.
I think it's great. So when I first learned about the important role that light plays in health, I was fascinated. I mean, some part of me then knew that I was going to be doing this kind of thing, and so it was just, I think, pulling me to it in a way. It was just this strong fascination, and it was this idea, epigenetics as a concept combined with light as a way to affect epigenetics, was super interesting for me, because epigenetics basically means that you're not limited by what your genes
Mm.
say. You can kind of create anything from that. So, you can grow taller, you can grow stronger, you can be fitter, you can live longer, you can live healthier, you can age in reverse, the stuff that people like Don't Die, Brian Johnson, are talking about all these days now. So this was fascinating for me. And again, light came as a very practical tool through which we can almost directly modulate epigenetics. Now, at the time, I developed what I would call like this kind of sun worshiper obsession. And because some of the people I was following at the time, who I no longer believe are 100% correct, based on working more directly with the who I consider to be the true experts themselves. But some of these folks were saying, you should just be in the sun as much as you can, and it's like survival, and it's the most important thing ever, and you just need to be in the sun constantly. And so for a couple of years, I really, in lacking knowledge, I sort of adopted this rhetoric myself, and was sharing it as if I were the expert. Now I do have a much more, I would say, moderate approach, that sunlight is a drug, and it's just like any drug. It should be used accordingly, and with caution and with care. So just for perspective, like, sunlight, it played a very important role, as far as we know, in evolution and biology. I mean, it still powers basically all, or a significant majority, of life on Earth. So that's just one fact for everybody to look at. Like, if the sun went away, life would go away. So obviously it plays a very significant role in our well-being. And I believe it's beyond the scope of this conversation, but essentially the wavelengths of sunlight and particular characteristics of the solar spectrum and the way it interacts with, like, so light comes out of the sun. This is a really interesting concept. My scientific advisor here, who I'm visiting, as I mentioned, right now, and doing great product development with, we're actually finalizing the development of our light bulbs, which we are so excited to launch, because we've been working on them forever. But basically, the light that comes out of the sun from the inside, it's created through the process of hydrogen fusion and these crazy reactions, and it's pushed out over long periods of time. And then on the surface of the sun, there's a part called the chromosphere. And the chromosphere has all of these different elements, all atoms. That's where all elements in the universe are made, is in stars. So people say like, oh, we're all just stardust. It's actually true. Like all of us are made of all the matter, the carbon and all hydrogen and iron and all these minerals and elements that make us up. Were created in stars, and eventually those stars died and the matter spread and maybe formed planets and whatnot, right? Eventually. So this light coming out of the sun is going through that layer, the surface layer of the sun. And the elements on the surface of the sun are absorbing the wavelengths of light that they particularly interact with. So what this means is that the light that reaches Earth isn't when people talk about full spectrum sunlight, it's not actually a full spectrum. There's basically gaps in the solar spectrum that created sort of a framework within which our biology could come to exist and function. They're called Fraunhofer lines. So anyway, this is getting kind of really deep, not esoteric, but deep into some of the science. There are a lot of ways in which sun literally kind of sculpted our biochemical reactions in biochemistry. And so this is something to really value. So anyway, at the same time, speaking of sunlight as a drug, so basic cells, basic bacteria, archaea, sunlight is toxic for them. Like there's a reason mold doesn't grow in sunlight.
That's right.
Like mold grows in dark, dingy, damp places, not in sunlight. Sunlight, the UV light, breaks apart biological structure. So complex life, like plants and animals, had to evolve more robust protection systems, but protection being the key word. The sun isn't our friend in many respects. Even if it's powering life, too much of it can be very, very harmful. So we, even as much more evolved animals, we have very robust protection systems against sunlight, just like plants do. Certain processes change in plants from day to night for them to be able to adapt to the sun. If in old days, if they wanted to kill someone through torture, they could tie them to a tower and sit in the sun for a couple of days and people would die eventually. Somebody with really dark skin would take longer than somebody with really light skin, but you'd overheat, you'd burn, you had a really intoxication of reactive oxygen species, which is like super, super sunburn. So what sunburn, but to the max. And it would kill people. So humans have known throughout history that they needed to protect from excessive sunlight. So we also, another important detail is we evolved this is something I actually learned this year. So the spectrum of light, if you go outside, a lot of the people I was learning from back in the day, and a lot of the biohackers have a big misconception, which is that all sunlight is the same. All sunlight's created equal. You walk outside and the light you're exposed to is just the best thing ever. It's just regular sunlight. If you go into a forest, all of the green around, the green that you see, it's chlorophyll in the plants, right? And chlorophyll basically absorbs short wavelength light. So the more harmful part of the spectrum. You have longer wavelength light, which is the more healing, red and near infrared. And you have the shorter wavelength, which is the more damaging, UVA, UVB, and blue light as well. And so these plants, just by the way plants work, chlorophyll, it absorbs the shorter wavelength light, but it actually reflects or re-emits the near infrared light, which is more healing for our cells. And so just by standing in a forest, people talk about the benefits of forest bathing for your mental health and all this stuff. Well, just by standing in a forest or around green plants, living chlorophyll, you're actually having a light spectrum, which is optimal for human health and for our cells. Most likely because we evolved as primates for hundreds of millions of years potentially, or tens of millions at least, in trees in the chlorophyll spectrum. And the light sensitivity of our eye, the color vision, is exactly matching a chlorophyll spectrum because it peaks in the green, which is the peak of what the chlorophyll spectrum reflects, which is why plants look green. So all this is to say, it's beneficial to go out in the sun for 20 to 30 minutes, per day and take a sun bath. It can be really good. If you have really dark skin and you're in a place with low light, maybe more because it takes longer for you to make the same vitamin D and so on. But to go out in the sun for hours, I used to think was a good idea, but it's not. Like you'll cause yourself aging. You'll cause even, potentially further risks if you overdo it. But at the same time, it's super nuanced because that doesn't mean you should just wear sunscreen. People are like, oh, well, the sun's bad. Sunscreen. Well, sunscreen's also not good. Why? Because sunscreen, the main way it protects against sunburn is by blocking UVB light, which is what causes a sunburn. But that's the warning signal. So you're
Yeah.
blocking the warning signal that something's going wrong. So you block the UV, and it also blocks some of the decent portion of the UVA, not necessarily all of it. So people who use sunscreen, ironically, to stay in the sun longer without burning, oftentimes can end up and will end up exposing themselves to far more UVA light, which is the part that ages your skin over time and cause more aging and more damage long term. So even though they don't get the immediate warning signal, which is a sunburn, they're still exposing themselves to this very powerful light, and it will have these long-term aging effects. So it's like sunscreen is okay. It can be okay. I prefer mineral sunscreen because
Yep.
it's not, this, of course, it's not absorbed into your bloodstream and you're getting
Yep.
all those. By the way, that's another thing is the sunscreen, which is blocking the sunburn, it's using all these chemicals, which are absorbing the energy of the ultraviolet light, which is
Yeah.
very powerful enough to, make a painting fade, making couch color fade. And so over time. So those molecules, those protective molecules are breaking apart and then they become damaging, oxidizing. They go into cells and steal electrons and create problems, which is where we have these now claims or evidence that these sunscreens cause cancer, some of the mainstream. So mineral is better, but people don't like it because it makes you look all white because it's more like a physical barrier.
Yep.
So there's nuance, if you have to be in the sun, okay, you can wear sunscreen. I always recommend, wear a hat, wear physical protection rather than chemical sunscreen, whether it's mineral sunscreen as physical protection or a hat and clothing as physical protection. Get some sun, but don't overdo it. Don't use sunscreen to trick your brain to think that you can safely stay in the sun for 5 hours, because that's not good for you either. So there's a lot of nuance to this, and I hope I've kind of answered your question about sun as a
Yeah.
drug. We can talk about more of the effects, but that's the gist.
Well, so one of the things I want to get into are, so much of what you're saying here and the way that really conversations like this go in so many ways are that we're working against modernity in general, is just in how we're living, is working against how we were created to live. Now we're hearing all of these issues like people having to take melatonin every night to sleep. They're having cortisol issues, they're having dopamine issues, all of these issues.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about how the sun impacts these, really, because they're very popular topics right now. There's so many people that are having issues with having, cortisol levels. They're starting to test them now, and that's becoming very common. But let's just talk about the basics of how the sun impacts these really important hormones and these hormone pathways.
Yeah, this is phenomenal. So simply put, these hormone pathways are part of the circadian rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
So they follow this 24-hour cycle. Pretty much all of them they're either directly linked to a circadian rhythm or kind of indirectly linked, but just about everything is affected by the body clock in these rhythms. So,
Yeah.
for example, the cortisol rhythm is part of our body's adaptation to sunlight. So, and this is something, again, I didn't understand the nuance until working with and speaking with it, the expert in the field really himself directly. So the reason blue light is what kind of controls our body clock. People have heard of this. This is why blue light blocking glasses target blue light. For the longest time, I thought I knew why, but I actually didn't know why. I thought that it was just because blue light, is one of the colors that changes the most throughout the day. That seemed like kind of the obvious thing, and it really does. But actually, the biggest threat to our system is ultraviolet, UVA, UVB. It's the most powerful light. It also has health benefits, just to be clear. So that's why I'm not saying don't get any sun. It's important to get some sun for everybody, pretty much. Even in the winter, especially also in the summer when it's out, when you can actually go and sunbathe. So for these protective systems, though, the system doesn't want let's say the problem wavelength or the problem range of light to be the warning, because once it comes, it's already there, So it would be handy if something could warn you before it comes so the system can prepare itself. And that's what blue light does. So blue light, especially blue light goes from around 400 nanometers to 500 nanometers on the light spectrum. We kind of, in my company, when we're talking about blue light, we kind of split it down the middle around 450. So above 450 nanometers, the blue light has more of an effect on our hormonal system, on our body clock, on the endocrine system. So on the sleep-wake cycle, on the production of cortisol or melatonin or serotonin or melatonin, for example, these types of things. That's above 400. We'll call it long wavelength blue light. The short wavelength blue light, so below 450 nanometers, it has not really a beneficial effect for our body clock or anything like this. It's actually just more damaging. There's not really much benefit to this based on what the research we're aware of. It's more like ultraviolet in the sense that it causes reactive oxygen species production in the eye and the retina and skin cells as well. So this is a part of the light spectrum that we would generally want to minimize or limit, similar to UV light. And unfortunately, it's the part of the spectrum which most modern LEDs and screen devices are enriched with the most. So anyway, we'll get back to the problem with screens and lights and these kinds of things in a moment. But so to your question about cortisol and whatnot, so this blue light is basically warning the brain and the whole system that ultraviolet is coming soon. And so the body and the brain releases cortisol, which has many effects. It's a stress hormone. It wakes us up. It helps put sugar in our muscles so that we can be active and we can do all the things that are necessary for survival, for hunting and all that type of stuff. But there are also certain effects from stress hormones, which are stimulated by sunlight, that affect, for example, how blood flows in our body to protect us from the sun. So there are a lot of these inbuilt mechanisms, just like, again, I mentioned earlier, that plants have. If we get a really bad sunburn, for example, there are ways that our body works to basically maintain its balance. A ton of in the case of a terrible sunburn, a lot of blood will flow to the surface of the skin. And this is, for kind of dissipating the heat and the excess energy, and also for healing. But if too much of the blood flows to the surface of the skin, you'll die. You could die. You need blood internally as well. So there's all sorts of systems that are regulating these processes affected by sunlight. So cortisol is part of this. Now, if we talk about problems and where it's going wrong, so this works in general when we're in nature. I think that's kind of implied for anybody who's who's listening to your podcast. I'm sure they generally believe in like what you said, which is that we're sort of optimized for the natural environment, and this world is taking us. We're losing our way, let's say. So, for example, when we have tons of artificial light during the day and we're in an office or on screens, this blue light, which, as I just mentioned, modern LEDs and screens are generally enriched with blue light for a number of reasons. It's energy efficient. It's addictive for the screens, very, and it produces a lot of intensity for the energy, as I just said, for energy efficiency. So it's kind of desirable from a light energy efficiency perspective for people whose goal is to have the most energy efficient lighting, but who mostly are just totally unaware that means generally really, really bad quality lighting that's bad for our health.
Yeah.
So during the day, one of the ththings that Dr. Wunsch, my scientific advisor, speaks about is that when we have this extra cortisol that's being produced by these indoor lights, we really don't need it, because when you're inside, you're usually not that physically active. Like maybe if you're at a gym, maybe, if you're at a warehouse or a factory, but for most people, you're at your house or you're at an office, you're sitting.
That's
so
right.
Cortisol, glucocorticoid hormone, it helps move sugar to muscles. How much of that do you really need when you're sitting around doing nothing with your muscles? Like, you don't need much, And so what happens is that people end up having a buildup of cortisol, but it's not really being utilized. And then people just end up stressed, and they end up, their heart's basically beating out of rhythm, and they're anxious and they're miserable. This isn't good. And so our concept of lighting, which I mentioned we're developing and hoping to be launching here within the next 2 months or so, I'm hoping by December or January, is what we call hormonally neutral lighting. So lighting which neither jacks the system up during the day. The sun can do that. That's good when you're in the sun and you're outdoors, active under the sky. It's good to have cortisol both for the activity effects and the kind of protective effects. But when you're indoors and sitting around, there's no need or real benefit in our view to jacking up the hormonal system. Secondly, in the evening, hormonally neutral means not preventing the body's natural release of melatonin. So once it gets dark outside, like it basically is just getting dark here in Germany, not preventing the body from releasing melatonin and doing its own thing naturally. So letting the sun being the director of the system and not the artificial man-made light, which there's a term human-centric lighting, which is the belief that you can use blue light and have it increase a lot during the day indoors and then bring it down, and that this is going to be good for people. Our belief is that this is not a good idea for the reasons I've mentioned, because you're going to jack people's cortisol up during the day when they don't really need it, and it's not beneficial or desirable. So we have a very different concept from both the mainstream lighting industry, which is just really bad quality lighting for maximal energy efficiency. It's like junk food from McDonald's. Costs
That's
a
right.
lot less electricity and a lot less money to make. Less money, less electricity. Junk light costs a lot less money and a lot less electricity, but it's really low quality. It's a very bad spectrum. It's not full of all the vitamins and minerals, let's say, of a whole food, which costs more time, more money, more energy, maybe more water, more farming, more care, less pesticides, et cetera, just to make an example. So this is kind of a point about the relevance of light in the hormonal system. And I think just two more important points. One is that
Yeah.
I mentioned the risk of too much artificial light even during the day, because that's when
Mhm.
people don't really understand quite as well. I hope that helps. But
Yeah.
at night, people understand it generally better, especially people in the health and wellness world. Like when you have bright lights at night, that's a direct contradiction to what we're supposed to have. Like some artificial blue light during the day, not the worst thing. Again, excessively, if you're sitting doing nothing, it will stress you out generally. It's not ideal. It's also physically bad for the eye, by the way. It has a lot of the wavelengths that I mentioned cause physical damage, reactive oxygen species, like similar to UVA light, just acting over a longer period of time, acting more slowly. But over a lifetime, 10 hours a day in an office, you'll get there. So unfortunately. So that's what the glasses are for. So then let's see. In the evening, it's just a direct opposite signal. We need to have darkness, which is what stimulates or kind of directs the release of melatonin, which is the hormone of darkness, which basically goes in and helps reduce mitochondrial energy production. Just like if you were to go to a mechanic with a car, you don't have the car running when they open the hood. They turn the car off, turn the engine
Yeah.
off so they can touch it safely. Same for melatonin to go in and heal the mitochondria and work on scavenging free radicals. It has to reduce energy production, slow things down, and then it can go in and do its business. And so melatonin is linked to a huge variety of health benefits. I mean, improved brain function, cardiovascular function, reduce risk of all sorts of diseases, cancers, and everything. It's our master antioxidant, anti-aging, anti-cancer molecule. There are several others, glutathione and so on, but it's critical. And artificial light at night literally directly disrupts the body's natural release of melatonin. And so that's a huge issue. And finally, that's critical. And that affects, by the way, all of this. I just talk about
Yep.
cortisol and melatonin, but all of this is disrupting serotonin and all the other
Yeah.
hormones which are linked to this cycle. If you're throwing it off, growth hormone. So people who want to be healthy and fit, and if you're throwing off your system with, and this fascinated me when I learned it. Like, whoa, there's this series of hormones which are released. There's prolactin and all sorts of other things. Growth hormone while we sleep. If you throw it off with artificial light at night, you're not just messing up your melatonin, sleep, and repair. You're messing up your growth, your gains for the fitness guys out there, all the other stuff that you want. So finally, I'll end with this. There was a study that came out of Australia about a year or two ago now. 97,000 participants. It was like a very long study. And it was looking at mental health and the impact of various factors, but in particular light. And what they found is that the groups of people the groups that had the best results, the best mental health, the least issues were the ones that had the most bright natural light during the day and the most darkness at night,
That's right.
or absence of artificial light. So basically what we see in nature. So we have the circadian rhythm, and the rhythm has two phases. There's day and night. And the way to strengthen the rhythm, we want a stronger rhythm, is more natural bright light during the day and less, within reason, not overdoing, not sunburning yourself, and less artificial light at night, or just more darkness at night. That's how you strengthen each phase of the circadian rhythm. And so that's what had those people and that group had the best mental health. Then any group, the two groups that had either less bright light during the day or less darkness at night, more artificial light, let's say, they were both kind of in the middle. And then the group with by far the worst outcomes, significantly increased risk of anxiety, depression, but even schizophrenia and much more severe psychiatric disorders, were the group that had the least bright natural light during the day and the most artificial light at night. So not only are the mechanisms really, really well studied and quite strong, but also you have the largest study ever done on light and humans at a population level and how it affects health and mental health, showing this very clearly. So it's something that people should take really seriously. And you have people like Huberman, by the way, who now has who knows how many millions of followers talking about the importance of light for your dopamine every single day, pretty
Yep.
much. And so people really should probably be listening up at this point.
So another kind of follow up to this, red light and red light therapy has become, popular for various reasons. When is red light important, and how should someone use red light? What is your perspective?
Red light's usually used as a term to describe red and near infrared light. And so near infrared is a part of the light spectrum coming from the sun to the earth. So the sun spectrum, just for everybody to know, is huge, just like all stars. It has X-rays and gamma rays and radio waves and all this stuff. But what makes it through our atmosphere is a fairly narrow band of light. And it's the sunlight spectrum that we see, the full spectrum of daylight. And it goes from ultraviolet C, little bit, but mostly ultraviolet B, A, violet, indigo, I'm going in reverse, blue,
Yep.
green, yellow, orange, red, near infrared, far infrared, infrared A, B, C, basically. So infrared A is near infrared. So anyway, near infrared has a huge amount of health benefits. In fact, it turns out 40% of the sunlight reaching the earth on any given day, on a cloudy day, a sunny day, 40% is near infrared of sunlight. So it's very significant. And it turns out that our cells actually use this energy for a lot of different things. So even our mitochondria use this energy to make energy. So red and near infrared wavelengths of light have been shown to enhance energy production in our mitochondria. So with no other changes, just exposing mitochondria to this red light increases the output of ATP. So like not changing your diet or anything else, just by getting this light, it's beneficial. And so my theory, I mean, it's not really my theory, but it seems fairly obvious. In nature, we were always exposed to this. And as I mentioned previously with the example of the forest canopy where we, supposedly evolved as primates, this environment, because of the chlorophyll spectrum, the light that chlorophyll pushes back out, that environment is really, really rich in this near infrared, even more than the regular sunlight spectrum. So our cells use this light for all sorts of different things. Unlike the ultraviolet light, which is, again, much more threatening and damaging, which has health benefits in certain within limits, but has to be otherwise protected against. The near infrared has great benefits. Now, there are studies, actually in vivo analyses of cells, so in glass, like cells in a dish. Yeah. People basically irradiating cells with blue light, so more short wavelength light, as I mentioned, is more the damaging part of the spectrum, with near infrared at the same time versus separately. Just the blue light, you see the cells, their membranes and everything, the cells are actually just degrading, like coming apart. Versus the cell, there's a specific dye that was used that tags the mitochondria, and the more healthy mitochondria, the more you see the dye as red. So when it was just the cells were just exposed to this blue light, after some time, they're basically degraded, that the mitochondria are super inactive, like they're dying basically. Whereas when they do the near infrared only, the cells are very healthy and lively. But then when they do the blue light with the near infrared, they maintain this sort of health and liveliness in glass, like in a dish. So our cells are no different in the skin and the eye. When we're being exposed to just short wavelength UVA, UVB, blue light, for example, a blue light, also we call it HEVL, it's high energy visible light. So especially the shorter part of the blue light I mentioned before, that's a huge concern from our screens and from our artificial lights. So the point is, when you're exposed to sunlight, there is this kind of antidote for the more damaging short wavelengths. It's present. Still can overdose on sun, especially in the middle of the day when it's stronger, but you at least have some of the antidote. As soon as we go inside, even though the intensities of artificial lights are, 50 times, many, generally speaking, for example, lower, or even more, 100 times lower than bright daylight, there's zero now with modern lighting since they banned halogen and incandescent bulbs due to energy inefficiency. Big scam,
Yeah.
by the way. But
Yeah.
there's none of this antidote, none of the near infrared, which is the healing part. And so, long story short, the sensors even in our eye, the way the system's very adaptive. So
Right.
you can see in very low levels of light, like almost in the dark, you can see, and you can
Yep.
see like under a moonlight, the intensity of the moon is 1 lux on a full moon. The intensity of the summer sun is 50,000 lux. So it's a huge difference. And our eye
Right.
has both physical, the change of the pupil, and chemical adaptations to adjust. The point is the system in the eye is highly adaptable. So people can say, oh, well, the blue light from an artificial light in an office, it's only 300, 500, up to 1,000 lux at most. How could that have any effect compared to the blue light from the sun, which is, the sun has 50,000 lux. There's no way that could have an effect, but actually it does because of how the eye is adapting to the different intensities. And then if you take out the antidote, this near infrared, screwed. So anyway, I'm telling you the negatives. The positives are if you live in the modern world and you're constantly indoors and you add back red and near infrared light, the theory is you're going to get benefits. And the cool thing is that's what the evidence says too. Tons of studies, thousands of studies on red, near infrared light showing tons. My Italian's coming out. I'm using my hands a lot, it looks like, but it shows so many huge benefits from people who are bathing in this red. So my advice would be for anybody, like for example, I have a video light right here. On top of my video light is a near infrared emitter. So I'm just giving myself near infrared to offset to balance all the visible light and the screen and the camera and all that stuff. And I have my glasses on to protect from the blue light as well. So I'm kind of blocking both.
Thank you. That no, I love that explanation.
Skin health, eye health, everything, mitochondrial health, increased muscle recovery, all the stuff that they're talking about, it's true for a reason. Also, you can just go outside.
So exactly. And that you hit the point. Also, you can just go outside. Right now, obviously people probably know you from Raw Optics and the glasses company that you've started, which are phenomenal glasses, but you're also in Germany right now developing lighting, right? And this is something I'm fascinated by. I'm mostly concerned, and we can talk about this with children. I think it's just, we're not talking about this enough. I mean, they're getting the worst of this. And so I really, commend you for working on the lighting and fixing that. Let's talk about, you mentioned this, that incandescent bulbs and these non-energy efficient bulbs were banned. We've moved away from them in the name of energy efficiency. It's a big scam. What is the scam of energy efficiency? Can you break that down and give us kind of the high level of why we're now stuck with lighting, that arguably is the worst for our health in our offices, in our homes, and in schools?
Basically, there's this idea, which, surely you and your listeners are familiar with, that, that we're killing the environment as humans. And that's not my topic to speak on for now. But there have been lots of efforts to fix that, and I think many of them are really good. Like, we shouldn't be polluting the oceans, and we shouldn't be dumping plastic everywhere and single-use plastics. Like, I'm all for that. Like, let's keep the planet clean. I don't like being in Bali and having trash in the rivers. That's disgusting, right? Like, totally all for it. I want great, healthy fish that's not full of mercury and all that stuff, right? Great stuff. There is a huge like a major energy savings when you cut out incandescent lights. Why? Because incandescent lights, they put in electricity into a wire, and it goes into a filament, a tungsten filament, and it incandesces. It puts out this beautiful spectrum of light, which really closely matches the spectrum of a candle. And it's really, really perfect light spectrum for it's essentially, it's what I spoke about earlier. It's hormonally neutral. It doesn't increase the production of cortisol during the day. It doesn't really prevent, to a significant extent, the release of melatonin at night. Maybe a little bit, but not much, because it's very warm light. It has tons of near infrared. It also has tons of far infrared. Most of the energy, I couldn't tell you the exact percentage, but I want to say it's like more than 80% of the energy consumed by an incandescent lamp is emitted in non-visible light. In other words, near infrared and far infrared. And the near infrared in particular has very, very valuable health benefits. The far infrared is what we feel as heat and can have some health benefits, like especially if you get enough to sweat, like a sauna, but not to the extent, let's say, of near infrared from a physical, cellular, biochemical effect. It would act as far infrared effects are more through activation of heat shock proteins and sweating and whatnot. And you're not really generally going to get that from like your general light sources. Although people have like sauna space. A friend of mine has this company. They make these great heat lamps that make you sweat. That's going to have an effect, but that's a ton. That's a different story. So anyway, for general lighting, this is a long answer, but I got you. So basically, to save energy, they said, let's cut out all that wasted electricity because there's light bulbs everywhere in halogen and incandescent bulbs, and use this compact fluorescent technology, which, puts mercury vapor into a tube and injects electricity. And that was the worst spectrum ever. And everybody hated those lights. And so they switched to LED as soon as that technology was a little more evolved. They were waiting for the evolution of the blue LED finally came through, and then they could make white light. And so modern LEDs are primarily based on blue based LEDs. Blue LEDs. And so they use, to kind of sum this up, they use a lot less electricity than incandescent lights, like massively less. I mean, I have to tell you again, it's like 10 times less. It's a huge difference. So if you put that across the entire planet, it is a big savings of electricity. But here's the thing. Savings of electricity. Okay. So what if I told you we're going to cut your refrigerator's electricity by 90% so we can save electricity?
Yeah, that's right.
Your food's all going to spoil. So yeah, you saved electricity, but at what cost? Your refrigerator doesn't work anymore. You saved electricity, but your refrigerator doesn't work. Or we're going to cut it for your air conditioning. You saved electricity, but your air conditioning, you're hot. So what's the point anymore, right? So it's like
the same analogy can be drawn with like big food, right? And we're going to make food more accessible and cheaper. And at what cost?
Yes, precisely. Right? So, but at what cost? And so the cost is the spectral quality is trash. And so basically you have a huge amount of blue light, which, going back to kind of earlier in the conversation, taking this full circle, it's kind of a great place to get to. We're now putting out a huge amount of high energy visible light, blue light, which it's kind of the peak in LEDs is perfectly positioned between the part of the blue light which causes the most physical damage to our eyes and skin as well, potentially, but the eyes the most exposed and sensitive because it's designed to let light in, whereas the skin is more of a buffer. It's kind of can let some light in, but it's still protective. The eye is an open door for light. That's why it's black. The pupil is black. And so this light's right in the middle, the blue LED spike between the damaging part and the part that affects our hormonal system. So at night, in other words, it's disrupting melatonin. During the day, it's overstimulating cortisol and so on. Okay. And so it's tons of blue light and none of the near infrared, the more healing part. And for kids, by the way, their lenses haven't evolved to be more protective as adults have. So naturally adults get some, let's say, like not cataracts exactly, but kind of like a precursor so that our lenses are actually a bit more protective. The kids don't have that protection. So that shorter wavelength light is actually coming through in much higher doses and causing more damage actually to their retina and the macula at younger ages. So like there's a reason all these kids, I mean, this is definitely part of why all the kids in especially Asia are need all of the glasses at such young ages, and more kids do. But anyway, to try to bring this home here, so they save electricity, but at the cost of making the spectral quality terrible, which has serious implications for damaging eye health, constantly disrupting hormones, which means disrupting sleep, disrupting health. Sleep disruptions linked to increases of every single disease, disrupting mental health, as that massive study showed, and all of these types of things. So, and then taking out the near infrared again also damages the health of the eyes and the skin and energy production across our body. So that's the effect of this low quality lighting. And over time, it means people are more tired, less energized, sicker, higher rates of disease, chronic sleep disruption. Like it's actually way, 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 way worse than people think, because we spend 92% of our time indoors under artificial light. And now that's artificial light, which is unnaturally jacking up our stress hormone. Every single disease is linked to increases in stress, or in other words, increases in stress is effectively linked to increases in every chronic illness. So that's basically, and then also to sleep disruption. So we're literally burning the candle, like we're killing ourselves, not just during the day, but also at night by disrupting sleep. So that's the cost, unfortunately, of modern artificial cheap lighting. And by the way, it just, so Dr. Wunsch, he did a bit of a calculation. If you look at the cost of one macular degeneration patient's treatment in Germany, for example, per year, something around 30,000 euros. So call it around $30,000. And I imagine it's fairly similar in the US. Like the cost burden of that alone to the government, if the government's providing healthcare, or to healthcare providers, to the people who are paying for their health insurance and everything, is gigantic. It's like
Yeah.
absurd.
Yeah.
And for a very, very, like a fraction of that cost, you could run an incandescent light for one person, like for your desk or for your house or for your kitchen, or for like 114 years or something, so for the energy cost of that, it's kind of unbelievable.
Yeah.
So at current rates. So this is the problem with modern artificial lighting. It's
Yeah.
really sad.
And the more that
We're
you
developing solutions.
Well, and the more that you peel back these layers, the more that you're just convinced time and time again that it's just good business to have sick humans, right? I mean, you look at this with the US and how much it costs to treat diabetes and obesity and all these mental health disorders. So there's growing interest in how light influences specifically women's menstrual cycles and mood. And we're particularly interested in this as a business, obviously focusing a lot on the gut and hormone health together, running clinical studies there. Women's health is unfortunately in a really bad condition. We have more infertility than we ever have before. And there's these, disorders like polycystic ovarian syndrome, all of these things that are just on the rise. And so I'd be really curious to see if in what you've studied and observed, if there's any differences in sunlight that affects the hormone balance for women and men. Have you looked at any differences between the two genders? And maybe what can you speak about with this hormone neutral lighting for women specifically?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question. So regarding, I can speak about the kind of disruptions, because
Mhm.
we were talking to one of the companies that's really big in female health and fertility and
Mhm.
tracking all of these types of things at one point, and I put together kind of a bunch of evidence for them that I was able to pull together from stuff I already knew, and some things I researched. And in the days before AI, so I spent hours and hours and hours pulling all kinds of studies, and it's pretty clear there is a massive link between the female menstrual cycle and circadian rhythms, or I should say they're quite related. The circadian menstrual cycle, it's considered an infradian rhythm. So there's circadian rhythm, which is approximately the length of a day, and infra, the rhythm, it occurs less than once a day, in other words, once a month. So it's considered an infradian rhythm. We also have like seasonal adaptations that happen with our skin and things. These are infradian rhythms, and so on, annual rhythms. And a life is one rhythm, actually. One full lifetime is one cycle as well. But basically, yeah, the evidence convinced me from everything I was reading that chronic circadian rhythm disruption could particularly affect women because of this additional cycle that women are, their biology is sort of relying on environmental cues for some really important processes, obviously. And it's interesting to me. I mean, I'm not a woman, so I don't want to speak too far out of my zone, let's say, but basically there are lots of people, as I understand, who argue that the menstrual cycle is just about the length of a month by chance, and that it has nothing to do with the phases of the moon. And I just think that's really interesting, very
Yeah.
interesting, to believe that, because
Yeah.
our body uses these environmental cues. It clearly has, like day, for something to kind of latch onto to manage things. And I mean, I think, I should say, I know a lot of girls who think more alternatively, and women who they're healthy and their rhythms are literally perfectly aligned with the moon, the full moon, the new moon, and whatnot. So just what I've heard. So anyway, and I also know women who have used our products and benefited just their overall health and
Yeah.
well-being, which affects their, for example, PMS. So there are
Yeah.
definitely studies on how circadian disruption can exacerbate PMS symptoms and so on. So yes, there's definitely evidence about this. As far as the way that sunlight would differently affect male and female health, I'll have to do a bit more digging on that,
Mhm.
and we can do have another
Yeah.
conversation about it. I think that'd be really fun. But surely too much ultraviolet light, if I'm not mistaken, can make women infertile, if I'm not mistaken. I have to
Yeah.
double check on this. But when So ultraviolet light degrades an important hormone. I have to brush up on this, but one of the very important hormones for fertility. So excessive sunlight is not going to be desirable
Yeah.
in general for a woman who's trying to get pregnant. It's folate, vitamin B9. This is
Yeah.
critical for pregnancy, and it's degraded
Yep.
by ultraviolet light, which for some experts believe that's why, part of why, or even a driving reason why humans developed skin pigmentation, because without
Yep.
that in like Africa or high UV environments, women couldn't become pregnant. So
Yep.
you need the protection anyway. So it definitely plays a significant role. Let's just say if that's just one piece.
So if you were to kind of boil it down, right, for let's just say parents, and let's just say they've got kids, so they've got a family, they're really concerned about everything we've talked about, right? They're concerned about their health. They're definitely learning more about light, concerned about light. Their children are being blasted with blue light all throughout the day. If you were to boil it down into what's a easy enough to follow daily protocol that you would say works for the whole family, what would that look like? What does an
I got you.
ideal day look like when it comes to light health?
So the light diet is what I call this protocol for improving the body function with light,
Mm-hmm.
or even better said, just realigning our system with its natural functions. The idea of hormonally neutral lighting is letting the system work the way it wants and not jacking it up and messing it up with artificial light in a way that doesn't necessarily align with how we're meant to be in nature, how we were. So anyway, the light diet has a few basic steps, and I'll just run you through the main ones bit by bit.
Yep.
This is kind of how I practice it. And it's kind of ever evolving. I do have some blogs and documentation I've written about in some course and some guides, PDFs, and so on. So happy to send that over for your listeners to have access to. But basically, in the morning, one of the most important parts of the light diet to me, I often end with this, but I'll start here because it's kind of in order through the day, is some sort of meditative practice or spiritual practice or prayer. It depends, who you are. But that for me, I find to be very valuable. And I think it's very valuable for everybody. For somebody, it might just be stillness, silence. It might be a morning walk. It might be, prayer. It might be reading scripture. It might be Tai Chi, whatever. But something like that in the beginning of the day, I believe is super important. And the let's say, I'll say wise sages throughout the ages have agreed that those early morning hours, it's great to wake up early and practice something like this. Now, I don't do it every day, but I try. And I know the days that I do. And when I do it consistently, I'm sharper, clearer, feel better. By the way, there's so much evidence on, and increasingly, on how meditation can even combat diseases by changing the way the brain works and taking the body out of the natural response to all the stresses in the environments, especially psychological, because now the majority of, or a huge portion at least, I don't want to say majority of stresses most people experience are psychological. There are plenty of physical stresses, glyphosate, electromagnetic radiation, blue light. There's also a ton of psychological stress, which is one we can also very easily control with the right tools. And, so there's this one top meditation expert and also kind of researcher, Dr. Joe Dispenza, who's quite well known, who does these huge events, and they have scientists studying, like top level scientists studying the results from just a week of meditating. And it's unbelievable. So really cool stuff. So anyway, that, and the reason I mentioned that as part of the light diet, even though if it doesn't sound related, is because that's actually, in my view, based on all the stuff I've read, modulating our, what I call inner light. So cultivating our inner light in a desirable way. That was kind of the missing piece for me actually through my journey for so many years. I was so focused and obsessed on the external light and sunlight and blue light and worried that this was going to hurt me or the sun's going to make me healthier, blah, blah, blah. So really, really important detail, I believe, for everybody. And I learned that from a ton of the books I read that our cells communicate with light. There's a critical interplay of light inside of us. And it made sense to me that if you're chronically stressed, well, then there's going to be less coherence or less order or whatever you want to call it. Our cells can kind of leak more light rather than be more efficient. And just by being healthy mentally and strong mentally through some kind of practice like that, you can make things better. So anyway, cultivating your inner light. Then when we get into the actual like outside light diet stuff, getting up and getting morning sunlight, 10 to 15 minutes every day. That's kind of the standard, gold standard. So, people like Huberman are also telling people now. I've been talking about this since like 2017. That was actually even earlier. The company was 2017. the Human Lab podcast didn't start till 2019, so we've been really at this for a long time as a company, telling people about the importance of morning sunlight. 10 to 15 minutes of morning sunlight, great with your kids too. If you have kids, why not get everybody outside, get them playing. 10 to 15 minutes isn't that much, but if you can go for an hour walk or a half hour walk, or have the kids playing in the yard, sit on the porch while you have your coffee, whatever, that has a great benefit in sort of getting all these systems going. If I'm traveling and I'm at a hotel, I might go out on the balcony or just open the window and stick my head out for 5 or 10 minutes and then try to get out for a walk shortly after. So there you go. Then continuing on, one critical part of the light, well, they're all kind of critical, but eating, I call this eat with the sun. So the light diet is a largely kind of hodgepodge of modern science stuff I learned in the years where I was primarily obsessed with studying the science. And then stuff that I've learned also just through traveling and meeting with people who are like traditional Indian medicine doctors and Chinese medicine doctors and people who I learned this stuff. At first I was skeptical, but I was like, oh, that sounds a lot like what the science is saying. Your digestive system is strongest and most active during the day when the sun is the strongest. I mean, that's what circadian rhythm research is showing, is that it's best to eat your meals during the day, not at night, not late at night, especially. But these traditional philosophies or medical systems say that the digestive fire is the strongest when the sun is the strongest, because the sun gives our body that power. And that's exactly what the research says. The near infrared and red light from the sun, which is strongest in the middle of the day, is what allows our mitochondria and powers our mitochondria to make more ATP, aka to burn more fuel and make more energy. So eat your biggest meal in the middle of the day. Interesting stuff. So anyway, eat with the sun. So when the sun's the strongest is the best time of the day to have your main meal at lunch, which is so counter to how pretty much many people operate. Some places in Europe, some other cultures, they'll have their biggest meal midday, but usually in America, it's like a 7 p.m. massive dinner.
Yeah.
That's not only when we're not digesting the food optimally and you're not getting the full value of the nutrients and all the things you're spending all this money on for your organic food, but also you're creating more toxin buildup and you're disrupting your sleep as well. So that's really not ideal. And people who wear Oura Ring sleep trackers know that if you eat late, it disrupts your sleep score. Kind of like alcohol, but not as much. Okay. So anyway, eat with the sun, critical. Don't eat big, heavy meals, heavy proteins like late, especially after 5 or 6 p.m. would be my recommendation, but ideally midday, make that your main meal. All right. Next, filter, mitigate artificial light during the day. So if you're on screen or you're under a bunch of artificial lights, use something like Raw Optics daylight lenses, which are designed to cut out what I was describing earlier, the short wavelength blue light, like more than 99% of the short wavelength light, which causes physical damage to the eyes, while also reducing the hormonally stimulating portion by approximately 50%. So you're reducing the hormonally stimulating, we'll call it circadian blue wavelengths, so much that you're going to fall asleep at your desk, but you're kind of reducing this unnatural like jack up of artificial lights. And so that's what these yellow daylight lenses are designed for. So mitigating the risks of artificial light during the day. And then again, when we have raw light bulbs, which are going to be it's kind of sad and crazy, but I mean, it's happy and exciting for me, but crazy that we really are going to be the first people to release a near infrared enhanced LED bulb, which is truly emitting a meaningful amount of near infrared. There are people who have tried to do it in really funny ways that we've taken apart, and they emit almost no near infrared, but it will be the first near infrared enhanced LED light source. We call it the incandescent LED. So it's freaking awesome. It's the coolest thing, and it's the future. Everybody's going to be doing it eventually. So anyway, but until then, use the glasses and also, get a red light panel and put it in the room and put it on near infrared only, and even on the lowest intensity, and bounce it off the wall, and it'll compensate for a lot of, or at least add back that near infrared. So that's something people can do at any of those devices. Anyway, so don't put it right next to your face and stare at it for too long if it's only near infrared, because people can overdose on near infrared too. But anyway, put it away, bounce it off the wall, or just put it on the lowest intensity, have it in the room. It'll fill up the whole room with near infrared. It's great. So anyway, okay, then you want to, let's see, I would say bonus steps just in the middle here: ground on the earth. Go barefoot when you're outside if you can, but ideally that's great. Reduces inflammation. Tons of research on that. I don't need to talk about that too much. Then another big one is, actually using things like red and near infrared light therapy. That's a bonus step, I would say, when you have to be inside or when you're, living in the modern world a lot. Drink unfluoridated spring water. Don't drink city water with fluoride and chemicals, because that is in the water in our body, and they're toxic, and body has to process them, and it affects, even some evidence shows or theories at least based on the mechanisms, affects our cells' ability to hold charge and even light energy effectively. So don't drink the tap water. They're putting poison in it, unfortunately. Okay, so then as we get towards the evening part of the day, also, I forgot to say sunbathe. So spend time outdoors. I mentioned that earlier in the conversation, but if you can sunbathe, this is I'd say hardest one to explain, but listen to your body, don't burn, and kind of build up from the spring into the summer. Don't just start in the middle of the summer. And if you go to a winter vacation to somewhere sunny, don't be stupid. Don't burn, build your exposure up over 2 or 3 days at least. Even go to a tanning salon, I'll say, before you go, and follow their recommendations. Don't overdose, and build up your exposure. And then go and get some sun. But I'm more and more a fan of following the seasons, even though I don't do it fully. I've been like a sun chaser for years now, since finishing. I grew up in the seasons in Philadelphia, 4 seasons, but now I've been kind of following the sun. But I long for seasons at this point in my life. So anyway, after 8 years of just moving all around all over the place. So okay, sunbathing, I would say 20 to 30 minutes per day tops, for at least somebody with fair skin in the summer, is enough. 10, 15 minutes on each side of your body is generally sufficient around midday. People can, again, dose accordingly to how you feel, but don't burn. You don't need insane amounts of sunlight. I can tell people, over time, if you keep overdosing, you will notice the effects on your skin. And it's you just don't want to overdose. Now, if you eat healthy, if you ground, if you drink clean water, if you respect your circadian rhythm, you'll be able to tolerate more sunlight. So it's nuanced. You'll be able to maybe take more of a tan, whereas before you couldn't. It's a good sign. The doctors who use sunlight to heal all sorts of diseases in the 19th century, before penicillin and antibiotics and Western medicine kind of took over, with the Flexner report and all this, the Rockefeller takeover of medicine and all this stuff, basically. And that's when they threw out all alternative, Ayurveda, Reiki, acupuncture, all that stuff, including heliotherapy. It was thrown out. But there were Swiss doctors and German doctors and European doctors who used light therapy to treat all sorts of diseases in the mountains, even from tuberculosis to wounds to depression and all these other sorts of things. And they found people who could tan really well were very healthy. So if somebody tans really well, that's a great sign of health. And they look good, they're vibrant, they're attractive. So building up your health to be able to take a tan is a valuable thing. Now, some people are very Irish or, Nordic, maybe will never be super tannable. But again, there's usually a spectrum, unless you're the lightest white, freckly ginger, then those people are generally very unable to tan, but again, still can improve their health and take a little bit of sunlight to get a benefit. So but they need very little because their skin's so light. So anyway, now let's get to the evening. Evening time comes again.
Through the evening, what to do. Again, this is, I think, where people really have a hard time.
Okay. It's promise it's easy.
In the evening.
So turn the lights off. But actually, people need lights in their house to function. So basically, I'm just going to make a hard sell right now we're going to release the best lights in the world in a couple of months. And these really are the solution, because you could try to buy incandescents wherever you live, but usually they're really hard to get now, because they're either they're really not making a lot of them anymore.
Yeah.
They're sold out. They're technically illegal. If you build a new house, you can't pass inspection, or they're not up to code in the beginning. So it's just logistically a bit difficult. But you can do that. You can use candles. That's you could get red light therapy panels or red light bulbs, these party bulbs that everybody has in their house, which is crazy now. Which are, in my opinion, very unpleasant, but that's what everybody's doing, because nobody made a better option yet. Thank God we're doing it. You don't need red light bulbs or yellow light bulbs. It's actually terrible in my view. It's just so unpleasant. It's just really not good for light has such a profound impact on mental health, as we've discussed, and just the quality, the warmth, the color rendering, which is something very few people, almost nobody talks about, of the light, has such a big impact on how you see the color of your food, how you see the color of somebody's face, the blush of their cheeks, their lips, their everything. And you get a bad image of yourself when you look at yourself in bad low quality light. That has a huge effect on when I go into a bathroom, just talking personally, I'm a guy, I'm not even a girl who's even maybe more sensitive. If I'm in a mirror and there's a nice, beautiful, warm light bulb, and I'm like, oh, I look at it, I feel kind of good. I look good. Yeah. That's great. You you go into a bathroom and it's the light's behind you and it's all you're I look all like a goblin, it's the shadows, and it's that has an effect on people's psychology, how
Yeah.
you look and how you see other people. And so anyway, we're all about having high quality light, which makes people also look good and feel good about themselves, and they see everything better. Anyway, so that's what we're developing, so that you don't have to have like red or yellow lights, which is basically what people have done, because people jump to the extreme. It's like, oh, blue light's bad. Well, let me just use only red, and that's
Mhm.
also not exactly the answer. Anyway, so for now, those are some of the options people can use until our lights have been released. Candles, you could use the red or yellow
And your
party
lights
bulbs.
are gonna
Those
be in the
bad.
form of light bulbs, or they
Bulbs for
actually
now.
bulbs for now? Okay, great.
Yeah, and
And
then
then
we'll have
so just kind of
strips and we'll have every form factor. But blue light blocking glasses, the one thing I didn't
yeah,
tell you, just if I may, it's that the sunset lenses we make are for this purpose. So if for some reason
okay.
you can't change the lights in your house, you can't, your husband or wife or parents or
Yep.
whatever won't comply, then I would just turn your own lights off and go into your own room. But
Yeah.
sunset lenses allow anybody to basically
Awesome.
filter the light, so basically over 99% of the light, and by the way, people say 100%, it's a lie. Nothing,
Yeah,
no lens blocks more than 100%. It's
that's
impossible.
right.
If you use a laser, the light will get through. But basically greater than 99%, very, very rigorously tested with my German scientists here with all kinds of
Yep.
stress tests, short and long term. I mean, we beam these things with really bright lights really close for a long time to see if it even makes an indent over time, like to simulate years and years of sunlight exposure. Both also short term, super bright flashlights that we use to test the lights. Totally proprietary testing methods, because nothing like this exists. So we're developing our own standard for blue light protection, because there's no international regulations or any sort of body that standardizes. So we're making our own. But anyway, um, these block the light not only that causes physical damage to the eye, but also the part that activates and stimulates the hormonal system. Also,
Cool.
again, the green and visible range, which another effect which nobody talks about, which is basically activating the photoreceptor cells, the cones, which are designed for color vision, which are supposed to get a rest at night. We're not supposed to
Mhm.
see color at night. They're supposed to chill out. So when you put these on, people say it's like a massage for their eyes, because your cells just get to chill. So the cones get to chill out, and the whole system is the stress production of cortisol is reduced, and melatonin can be released, and the system can chill. So put these on either at sunset, from sunset to
Mhm.
sleep, or 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. And so the brain starts to release more melatonin. It makes it easier to fall asleep. It's Forget about easier to fall asleep. It's all, I mean, don't forget about it, but it's so relaxing. Like I feel much
Yeah.
better even. I'm glad I just put them on. I'm not taking them off because it's dark outside. And then you sleep better, you have more melatonin. So there's all sorts of health benefits of that. And it's just an amazing intervention. I'm not going to lie. So
So
people can use this. That's
if
basically
a,
it.
if a listener is just still skeptical, right, about premium eyewear, and they're kind of like, this is all okay, Yahoo, but it's a couple $100 for these glasses, whatever. Um, what is something that they can track, tangible benefits that they can track that you guys have heard
Amazing.
from your users within the first couple of weeks? What is the
Yeah.
normal feedback that you guys hear?
For the skeptics, because we want to talk about to the skeptics. I got you. So the deal is that, and I'm really not like somebody to, I don't really sell my products that much on podcasts. Like I usually don't try to, but I guess today it's your questions have led me here. We offer people a month to try the products, and if they don't like them, they can return them for a full refund, and we pay for the shipping. So it's like, take them for a month. If they don't meaningfully change your life, return them. Like, fine,
Hmm.
not gonna make me upset.
Hmm.
But anyway, so that's the reality, like the belief, just for anybody who's skeptical. But
Yep.
we worked with Aura in 2022, the maker of the sleep tracking ring. We had a
Yep.
partnership where they gifted our glasses to their customers who would refer a friend to get
Yep.
a ring. And they're like, hey, thanks for referring your friend. You're going to get a free. They've done this with Lululemon and with all sorts of
Great.
other companies. So our glasses were awesome because they were one that wasn't just apparel, but they actually had an impact. And we actually
Yeah.
saw we got so many voluntary customer reviews, and so many of them basically said, my deep sleep is far better. I'm
Mhm.
falling asleep faster.
Mhm.
My deep sleep doubled. My HRV got better. This was the kind of so if you wear a Whoop or just do a study on yourself. We're going to run a study eventually. It's just something we have to organize. We're so busy changing lives. It's like we don't need to prove the skeptics that it works, because it's already working. So
Yeah.
take it or leave it. But anyway, we'll run a study eventually. But get a Garmin or a
Yeah.
Ring or a Whoop or whatever. Wear it for a month. Put on the glasses. wear it for a month. Like, you will see that your sleep score gets better. It happens every single time. The former CEO of Aura told me that. I was like, well, let's do a partnership. And so that's
Yeah,
kind of how it started. So
that's
anyway,
great.
I'm like, that was his experience. Like, he's like, we know of all the things we do on a daily basis, like the number one thing that makes the most like significant effect if you do it or don't do it is the glasses. Now, obviously eating a late meal has a big effect. Drinking alcohol will ruin your sleep as well, but that's huge. So, effects people will, besides the markers and the stuff I said, customers with the sunset lenses, they say that these are edge cases, but just being transparent. But we had a woman who was addicted to sleeping pills for like
Mm.
25, 30 years, she said. Weaned herself off the sleeping pills with the sunset lenses. Same with a kid.
Oh.
So that was an old woman, a young kid who had childhood cancer, who was
Mm.
highly susceptible to coronavirus. The parents were terrified that the kid was going to get sick and die. And so they started dosing her with melatonin because
Mhm.
they read somewhere that was like protective against COVID or early in the corona when nobody knew what was going on. And then the kid was hooked on the melatonin. And so they were able to wean their child off the melatonin because it couldn't sleep at all without melatonin. So with our lenses, they were able to wean their child off of the melatonin supplements. So that is another example of the power of light through the eye. It's master regulator of the whole system. So anyway, these are some of the effects. People sleep better. They have more energy. They feel more clear. Their brain function works better during the day. They feel more rested. They can't imagine living without the relaxation in the evening. That's kind of the gist of it.
Totally. And everything we covered really on the whole idea of hormone neutral lighting is so good. So we'll make sense of all that. So, Matt, thank you obviously so much for your time today. And just kind of in closing, if you were to just maybe share what you're the most optimistic about with the future of lighting, and also, some of the call outs of what people can be doing on a day to day basis, what would some of those things be?
I think the world's really going to change as more and more great innovations come along, and I'm excited about that. And lighting for me is one big part of that, which we're able to contribute to. I'm able to contribute to based on my unique personal experience, and then starting this eyewear company to protect from bad light. Ultimately, knowing all the while that the real issue is the artificial lighting, and that we would eventually get to fixing it. It's just a much bigger project. So that's where we are now. Very exciting. And then as far as tips, I think really all the pieces of the light diet, I just recommend people take that and apply that, get morning sunlight. I really think the power of meditation, as I mentioned, is critical in this modern world where there's so many stressors all around. Wearing something like Raw Optics blue light blocking glasses, or, we're actually shifting the whole thing to be called functional eyewear, because it's really, blue light blocking is just a terrible name, actually, in my opinion. So we're just going finally a different direction. So functional eyewear with real benefits for the modern world. And I'd say those are some of the really valuable tips, and just like, have fun, enjoy your life. Why not? So people struggle too much.
If listeners are wanting to follow along with you personally, but then also with the company, where can they follow along for updates and to get the latest news on what the company's up to and where you guys are heading?
So for the company, people can check out rawoptics.com, raoptics.com/subscribe. If you want to join our email list, we send out cool information, discounts, updates on product development, and so on. So, and if anybody wants to just get product development updates, you can, I guess, when you go in, you can probably select that, something like that, or unsubscribe from the other stuff. Like, I just want people to get what they want to get. So that's there. There's just a website in general, rawoptics.com. We're going to be launching a new website here in the next couple of weeks, which I'm extremely thrilled about. So what somebody sees today, or well, depending on when this comes out, probably by mid-November or late November 2025, we'll have a new website. So very exciting there. And then, yeah, I'd say that's the biggest deal. And then raw_optics on Instagram. And for me, the light diet on Instagram, the light diet. I share my personal journey, story, travels. I'm constantly traveling. So yeah, that's all. Thank you so much.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to the Gut Check podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a comment below. Let us know what you think, like the episode, and share it with friends and family who may also benefit from learning about these important and educational health and wellness topics. You can find the Gut Check podcast on YouTube, also on Spotify, Instagram, and TikTok. The Gut Check podcast is brought to you by our team at Daily Nori. Daily Nori makes probiotic and prebiotic solutions accessible to all because good health starts with gut health. To learn more about Daily Nori, please go to www.dailynori.com. Thank you.